Well, hello there. My name is sometimes Heather and I play Elder Scrolls Online. Last week, I showed you what happens when you enter Direfrost Keep, Tempest Island, Volenfell, Blessed Crucible and Blackheart Haven on your own, and today I will continue with the next dungeons. There are 16 group dungeons in the base game. 8 of these have 2 versions, 1 and 2. Each dungeon can be tackled in normal or veteran difficulty. Base game group dungeons all have a recommended player level. Today we'll focus on the last 2 dungeons, which do not have alternate versions. We'll delve deeper into Selene's web and bolts of madness, while our main question remains: can you solo it? Let's start with spider-infested Selene's web. Along with 8-legged foes, you can find many sorts of animal enemies here. We get to battle horrors and wolves, sensuous spirits and thunderwolves. The layout of this dungeon is a bit confusing, but the enemies remain pretty easy throughout the way. The first mini-boss, Trethane Kermin, is a Bosmer warrior who will snare you with spider webs for a set amount of time. You cannot escape the stun, but I would categorize this as a minor nuisance rather than an obstacle. A bit of patience will help you get rid of Kermin in approximately 20 seconds. Behind Trethane Kermin's corpse, we find a pretty valley. A dangerous leap is required to enter. I would advise you to not go there. Instead, turn around to find a fork in the road and choose the other left. A safer path leads us to more enemies, a lesser drop, and eventually Longclaw, our first real boss. This Khajiit hunter will first set a pack of Sensuous tigers at you. Once you kill them, Longclaw brings them back as sensuous spirits and also joins the battle himself. Longclaw is armed with a bow. He will use it to rain arrows on you. He will also use poison against you. Despite the eccentric companions and poison, I would say Longclaw is a pretty easy boss. After a trek through a root door and damp tunnels, we find a horror boss. Queen Akleia uses poison and melee attacks against us and should fall with little trouble. During the battle, ordinary horrors will join the fun. You might want to get rid of them as they come to avoid taking too much damage. Here we find another root door that will lead us to Selene's sanctum. Sadly, it is not accessible yet. As we turn to the other left, a tunnel will lead us to the area we admired in the beginning. At the very end, we come across Foulhide, a large bear boss. Foulhide will charge at you to knock you down and fear you to stun you for a bit. He will also bring forth Selene's roses. These stranglers will attack you if you stand too close to them and can basically be ignored. I took my time with this boss and the amount of roses grew a bit ridiculous. As this is a dead end, our best option is to turn back. Upon backtracking to where Queen Akleia fell, we find another mini-boss, Menhir Manylegs. This Bosmer summoner will fear you and stun you in many ways, and summon spiders to bite at you. Despite their tricks, Menhir should also fall with relative ease. And as she falls, the door that leads to Selene's sanctum will unlock. We've already seen glimpses of Selene, enough to know she is a pretty big spider. As we find her resting on her web, she doesn't seem like a worthy foe. Hit points are low, mechanics weak. As Selene draws close to death, the web breaks, allowing us to fall to the ground beneath. And once we get the spider to hit 50% health, she turns into a powerful Bosmer changeling who, I dare say, is a worthy final boss for this dungeon. In her Bosmer form, Selene will ensnare you for a set amount of time. You cannot escape or break the stun. Selene will also summon bats, sentries, archers and healers to bother you. As the smaller enemies keep on coming, you should get rid of them accordingly. Otherwise, their combined power will grow overwhelming. This can prove to be a long battle, but not at all impossible. Enemies are numerous, yes, but it's pretty easy to get rid of them. In conclusion, I'd say Selene's web is very much solvable. Also fun. As it happens, my absolute favorite base game dungeon is saved for the last. Let's head on over to Vaults of Madness. I have a pledge and everything. In this blissful place created by the Mad Architect, we meet Daedric enemies from Panikins to Tremoras, seducers, ogre skeletons of all sorts and even zombies. A wide variety of foes makes everything more fun, don't you think? Our first boss enemy, the Cursed One, almost managed to kill Liliane. You see, this wraith creates a life link between itself and a chosen player, which is you. Through this link, all damage done to the Cursed One is shared with the linked player. I really like this mechanic, but it can surprise you if you're not ready for it. Behind the Cursed One, we find Ulguna Soulreaver, a large harvester. Ulguna is actually a really difficult boss due to a mechanic which cannot be avoided or broken free from. She picks up a player to tear at their soul as they float and moan in agony. During this time you can't really do anything besides check IG for new pictures of cats, of course. As you are released, Ulguna will draw a breath and repeat the soul-wrenching attack. I had plenty of time to recast Surge and Boundless Storm along with other curses, hop to her as Blood Mist and use Lightning Flood to deal at least a little bit of damage. Ember, I think, did most of the work here. I would say Liliane's build worked pretty well here due to the amount of passive damage she can do, but if you rely on active damage, this boss might prove to be a real challenge. After winding corridors decorated so pretty with skulls, we meet Death's Head, a Bone Colossus mini-boss. This entertaining enemy will use all the usual Bone Colossus tricks and also barge around a bit aimlessly. This actually does a lot of damage, so beware. Death's Head will also summon Risen Dead to his aid. These skeletons will explode if not killed quickly enough. Fun but ouchy. As mentioned, Vaults of Madness is a really pretty dungeon. This next portion requires you to hop down through a series of broken bridges and pedestals filled with minor enemies. As we reach the end of this maze, we meet Grothdar, a flesh Atronach who wields the power of flame. For starters, he will throw 2 fireballs to the ground. These will morph into fire trails that will snake through the battlefield until Grothdar falls. He can also hit you with his mace to knock you down. I really like Grothdar. He's an enjoyable enemy and his monster helm is pretty okay too. Moving on through tunnels and corridors, we come to a large room where a horde of enemies awaits. Among them stands Razor, a Daedroth miniboss. He is accompanied with 2 Tremora mages and can spit fire in various ways. This enemy is far less intimidating than the pool of blue water we find in the tunnel behind him. It took me literally 2 minutes to get out. After drying off, we come to a dead end. Our only option is to jump down into another pool of blue water. Exiting is a bit easier here. On the shores, we find a staggering amount of small enemies. We have to kill them all to advance to the stairs, where we meet the Ancient One, a giant Watcher miniboss. This one can send out a beam that will do quite a bit of damage. Standing behind the Ancient One is a sure way to avoid this. He can also, without warning or indication, release a burst of magic damage around him, and that kinda really hurts. So try to stand behind the Ancient One and keep your distance. Vaults of Madness is another pretty large dungeon. We have 2 more bosses to go. On top of these stairs, we find Iskra the Omen, a Daedric Titan. Iskra can, among basic Titan things, spit out lines of blue ethereal fire. These lines linger for quite a while, and should not be stepped upon, for they do quite a bit of damage. He can also jump up and knock you down upon returning to the ground. Iskra is another entertaining boss with fun mechanics. After the battle, we can enter the Vault of Doom to find a amazing view. This is seriously one of the most glorious sights I've seen in ESO. The ghostly floating pedestals hold a beauty I'm drawn to. But we mustn't linger. Instead, we will take a leap of faith into yet another pool of blue water. I've been taught that if something glows blue, you run, so this kinda hurts my sense of self-preservation. Another trek through tunnels and broken bridges takes us to the final enemy, the Mad Architect. This super fun boss summons all sorts of undead to fight by his side. As these arrive in numbers, you really should get rid of them. After the summoning of undead, the Mad Architect will summon an unavoidable explosion. He can also draw runes on the ground that deal high amounts of damage and summon spirits from the ground around him. And to top it all off, he can shield himself with a purple dome while the rest of the battlefield goes boom. To avoid taking a serious amount of damage, you should also stand under the dome. But despite all the tricks, Mad Architect is far from impossible. I'm happy to report that Vaults of Madness is not only solvable, but also an absolute joy to venture through. And this concludes our series of Can You Solo It? I do hope you've enjoyed these videos. I will take a bit of a summer holiday now and will return to you eventually with a new build. Thank you so much for watching, following and supporting, and I will see you all later. Ta!